Hello, I'm Daryl Powell, and I am the owner of Cornerstone Rabbitry and Cages. We build tons of cages, and so that's what I want to talk to you about today. What size is best for you in your particular situation? And so we will tackle that here in just a moment. So stick around. On our channel, our focus is to help you have the best rabbit project possible. And so I encourage you to take a look at our other videos. Please like, share, hit that bell so that you'll be notified of other videos that we have coming up. So let's get straight into the video. First of all, it is probably the number one question I get, especially by newbies, and that is someone who's brand new to the meat pen showing livestock shows. So, having said that, when I get this question, the first thing I have to ask is, what is your situation? Because every situation is a little bit different. So, let's kind of go through this process. First of all, where are you going to put the cage? Is it going to go in a shed, a garage? Is it going to go into a barn? Is it going to sit on the back patio? Do you really not have a place for it? Is it going to be sitting out in the open? How are you going to hang the cage? Do you plan on building a frame? Is it going to sit on top of a frame? Because the cages that we build are all welded wire cages. It's not a hutch made out of wood that you typically use hardware cloth for. And so this cage has no shelter whatsoever built into it. And so it typically is going to be put in a barn or some kind of structure, a lean-to, something along those lines. But I don't know what your situation is. I don't know where you're going to be placing this cage. But in every situation, we typically have a solution. So I just need to know first and foremost, what is your situation? Where are you going to be putting that cage so that I can kind of guide you into the right direction? So, we use 14 gauge galvanized after welded wire. What that means is that they take wire, they weld it, and then they run it through the galvanized liquid, and it puts a coating on all of the wire. The 14 gauge is a thicker gauge than what you're going to find at most of your hardware stores and so on. Most of the time they're going to have 16 gauge in stock. Now keep in mind that the higher the number as far as the gauge is concerned, the smaller the wire. So 14 gauge wire is thicker than 16 gauge wire. So having said that, the wire that we use is Riverdale wire, made in the USA, and it will last 20 to 30 years if you take care of it. So, having said that, the wire is rung together. We use pneumatic rings to assemble the cage itself. So it is completely open. We use 1x2 wire on the top. We use baby saver typically as the dividers and the front, back, and sides. You can get solid dividers if it's necessary. And then the floor or the bottom wire is 1/2x1. And so it's a very stout wire, having been welded together. And so the cage is self-supporting to a certain degree, depending on how long that cage is. So, when it comes to where are you going to put the cage, we have to take into consideration the length. And so all those types of things come into play. How are they going to be protected from the elements? Primarily the rain and the cold. Now, down here in South Central Texas, we don't have much cold as far as what we need to protect the rabbits from. In fact, we would use that cold is good, but we do not want the rabbits to be where the wind is blowing or rain. We do not want them to get wet, in other words. So that's not good for any animals. A draft or getting wet. So keep those things in mind. And if you call me and you want to get a quote and we're going to, go down that path, that's going to be one of the first questions that I ask you is, where's the cage going to go? If it's going in a barn, really no big deal. Typically, anyways. Unless we're talking about length. Maybe you have some horse stalls, but they're not very long. Our most popular cage is a 5-hole 24 by 24. Well, I'm talking about 24 inches by 24 inches, which is 2 feet. 5 compartments in this one single cage then makes that cage 10 feet. You may have a horse stall that's only 8 by 8 or something like that. And so therefore, there's a limitation of what length of cage you're going to use. Let's go ahead and talk about the different breeds. You have your miniature breeds, and then as a general rule, some medium-sized rabbits, then your large breeds, and even your giants like the Flemish giant. So for years and years, the common standard for your large breeds, which were for your meat rabbits, Californians, New Zealands, Palominos, chinchillas, and so on, you would use a 30 by 36 for the does. The buck would be in a 30 by 30. That standard has kind of shrunk a little bit, and we've seen no issues as far as the litters are concerned. Now, if you have large litters, if you're using, say, if you have New Zealand composites, the Texas A&M rabbits, and they have large litters, such as 12 and even sometimes 14 in the litter, and then you would definitely want to go to a 30 by 36. But if you are going to just be housing these rabbits and you're going to have 6 to 8 in a litter, 30 by 30 is fine. And in fact, what we can do is make one of those compartments, if you are breeding, a buck compartment, a buck hole, and that only needs to be 24 inches wide. Saves a little space, and it doesn't give as much running room for that doe to run around and maybe have to be chased down, if you will, by the buck. But if you are, in which we cater to the 4-H and FFA, you'll want to listen, this is important for you. You can go with a 24 by 18 hole size compartment cage. So if you're going to get 4 kits, then you can get a 4-hole 24 by 18. If you're going to get 5 kits, a 24 by 18, 6 kits. The 24 by 18 is talking about the front to back is the first number, 24 inches, and then it's 18 inches wide. Now that's all you need for a single rabbit. We'll talk about why you would separate them in that size of compartment here in just a moment. But probably the most popular is a 5-hole 24 by 24. Do you need that much room? Does one of these kits need that much room? No. But, you know, sometimes that's what people hear. And so because Joe Smo got that size cage, then I've got to get that size cage. But it's not absolutely necessary. So, if space is not an issue, then go with the 24 by 24. However many holes you need, depending on how many kits you're getting. If you're getting 10 kits, then get two 5-hole 24 by 24s. But if space is an issue, then maybe the 24 by 18 will work better for you. As far as the kit that's growing up from 5 weeks old to 10 weeks old, a 24 by 18 hole is plenty of room. Okay, now, if space is a premium, it's a major issue, you can go to a stack cage. And so we do build stack cages. A stack cage is that one cage is going to be above another. You typically don't want to go any more than 3 inches. Excuse me. 3 holes because of the height. Now, if you don't mind getting up on a step ladder to service, you know, to feed, to check that rabbit, and of course you're going to need to be pulling that rabbit out every day, then that's fine. We can do 4-hole, we could do a 5-hole stack as far as that's concerned. Keep in mind that on the stacks, we typically do 18 inches from floor to top. Now, you have to create enough space for the tray. So that's going to be 3 inches. So now we're at 21 inches. So 63 inches later, be a little bit higher if you're going to have it on casters, if you're going to have legs and casters. So take that into consideration. So if we're just going to round it up, which it wouldn't be exact, but 2 foot, you see a 4-hole, you're at 8 foot. We can minus a few inches because it's not actually 24 inches. It'd be just 21 inches. So that's 3 times 4 is a foot. So you're 7 feet at the top of that cage if that cage is sitting directly on the floor. Well, most likely it's not going to be sitting directly on the floor. So if you have 4 inches, let's say for your casters, so you're 7 foot 4 inches. Well, you know, that's almost to the ceiling in, you know, any kind of a garage or something along those lines, some type of structure. So these are all the types of things that you need to take into consideration. And the size of the cage depends on the breed. It depends on the age that you want to grow that rabbit out to. And so, are you going to be breeding this rabbit? Is it going to be strictly for show? And so on. Maybe it's just a grow out pen. So, when it comes to breeding your minis, so the Netherland Dwarfs, Mini Rex, Dutch, you can have them in a 24 by 24. The mamas, the does, can be in 24 by 24 and they'll do just fine. Your grow out, 24 by 18. Your large breeds, if you're going to grow them out, then probably a 24 by 24. For breeding, you want 30 by 30. The buck can be in a 30 by 24. If you're keeping that same distance from front to back, it just keeps it uniform. You might want to put in a solid divider for your buck. That divides that buck from the does. And it'll keep him from spraying. What he's doing is he's urinating and spreading his urine all over, and so it'll stain up the does. And you certainly don't want to do that if you're showing. So if these are grow outs for show, and it's going to include bucks, you might want to go to solid dividers between all of these compartments, these different holes within that cage. Now, when it comes to your giant breeds, the Flemish Giant and so on, it'll be important for you to have a 30 by 36 for your grow out, and also if you're going to keep the litter together. And that's another thing you might want to take into consideration in regard to the kits for the meat pen project. You could easily put 6-8 kits all in the same hole. A 30 by 30 single hole will be just fine. They might get a little cramped closer to the end of that time when you're going to be taking them, right before you're going to be taking them to the show. But the primary issue is that you have no control over the feed consumption. And so if you're just constantly giving them feed, and you've got some that are kind of piggies, and they're eating all the food up, either the food is consumed and the others aren't getting as much feed as they need to have, or you're giving them all this feed and you're feeding them a couple of times a day and you're filling that feeder up, and they're still, those who are the ones that are gonna be little piggies, they're eating that food and they're growing a lot faster than they need to. And in fact, they may be overweight at the time of show, and now they're DQ'd, they're disqualified. So that's the reason a lot of people will choose the 5-hole 24 by 24 if they get 5 kits. That way they separate those kits in each of these holes, and then they have complete control over the feed consumption and so on. They have complete control over the diet of that particular rabbit. They pull that rabbit out and they weigh it every day, and I have a video on that, the daily routine. So getting back to the different size of these holes that they should be. If you're raising Flemish Giants, for example, you're going to want to have a 30 by 36 hole for the doe. And then if they're just going to be butchered, then you need another hole that same size to grow those rabbits out to butcher. So if you've got New Zealand composites, or you got some of these crosses, New Zealand Californian and cross and so on. So it just really depends on your situation. But if you are raising a 4-H project, I highly recommend going to the separate holes for each kit. And then that way you have control over what they're going to consume each day, their weight gains, and so on. So, having said that, you can, going back to this idea, let's say that you are going to need a 5-hole, but it's too long. Well, we can just build you a 3-hole and a 2-hole, and you'll accomplish those 5 holes. If you're limited on space based upon a horse stall or something like that that's going to be in the barn. Now, our cages, the way they are built, especially if they're going to be under a lean-to or in a barn or a shed or something like that, you can actually just put a 16-penny nail. They don't make nails quite like they used to, and that's being serious. Maybe you would need to get a hook, something that you screw into the post, a stud, and so on. But you could take that cage and just hook it onto those hooks and not have to use any wires. If you're going to hang the cage, then what I would advise getting is a roll of, at the hardware store, of the 14-gauge hot wire. And then you can just run that wire, staple it to a rafter, and then just run it down to your cage, connected at the corners. If it's going to be more than 3 holes long, then put one in the center or wherever a divider is on the center. It's always good to put that wire at a divider. The wire is going to have some weak spots, but if it's going to be strong anywhere, it's going to be where there's a divider there at that top wire. So that's where you would want to put that wire for hanging the cage. You can also take T-posts and use that same wire or coat hanger, whatever you have that's obviously going to do the job, and wire the cage to the T-post. The T-post then become legs. You can also, having said that, you can put taller or have the T-post taller on the back side, or excuse me, on the front side than the back side. And you can drill a hole in the 2x4 that just runs across a little bit higher than your T-post. And so here, let's say this hand is the T-post, and that the 2x4 goes above that T-post. T-post isn't going to rot. I mean, yeah, over 100 years it will, but nothing like wood, right? Okay, so the 2x4 then is wired to the T-post. It runs that full length. If you've got a 10 foot, you might want to get a 12 foot. And you do that on the front side and the back side of the cage. So the cage is wired at the corners, at the top and the bottom. That's just, might as well go a little bit overboard than not, enough. But anyways, you've tied the cage to the T-post. You might need a center T-post depending on how many holes you have going across there. The T-posts are sticking up. 2x4 runs along there. You just drill a hole in the board. If you have to drill 2 holes, you take that wire and then just twist it to make it tight. Make the board tight to the T-post. Now you can run 10 and just screw the 10 straight into your 2x4, and you have a roof. This type of cage, especially if you did the same thing on the back side, you have the 2x4 that's on the back side of the cage, and you just run that 10 all the way to the ground, and the T-posts or the legs, that's what's supporting the cage. So the 10 isn't supporting the cage, but it runs all the way to the ground just to protect the rabbits. You can run it on the side and on the back. Now what you've created is somewhat of a lean-to type structure for your rabbits that under most circumstances wouldn't cost you more than 6 T-posts, possibly just 2, and they only run what, $5 or $6, something like that. Maybe you can find some used, might have some lying around. A 2x4, $7-8, a couple of those, and then some 10. Just keep an eye out on Facebook, YouTube, not YouTube, but Craigslist, and you can find some used 10. If you had to silicone the holes just to close them up so it wouldn't leak there, it's no big deal. And you can have 3 sides on the rabbits with a roof. It could be sitting out in the middle of pasture practically. Put that north, the back side to the north. So if we have any fronts coming through, it blows on that back side and not in their face. And if you do have a shed, a barn or something like that, maybe you can't use the barn, maybe it's cemented and you really don't want the poop to be falling on that and so on. We can address that also. But nevertheless, you can have a structure relatively cheap. I would suspect less than $100, easy. And now you have your rabbits protected. So we are happy to help you in any way in regard to that, to give you some advice and just how can you work the situation that you have, what materials do you have, and how can we get you into a rabbit project and have success. So we have customers all the time that have their rabbits in a garage. They take a tarp, And they're not having to worry about a roof or a ceiling. That's already there because it's in a garage, so they already have that protection. They will take the T-posts, or they'll take 2x4s, make legs, just wire the 2x4s to the cage, and that secures it. It's not going to go anywhere. And now what they can do is take a tarp, or they'll take bisqueen. The bisqueen can come on a big roll, and so they have that at one side of the cage, and it's got a 2x2 or a dowel piece of rebar that's running through there. They just grab that the bisqueen, and they pull it down underneath there. They tack it to the 2x4s. That kind of holds it up, and they have it funneling right into a 5-gallon bucket. And every couple of days, if not every day, they take that bucket and they dump it. That bisqueen starts showing some wear and tear. Then they just cut it with scissors, just pull out a new strip. And they just do that over and over and over. But as a general rule, you don't have to do that. But that's taking a long cage, a 10-foot cage, and just dealing with that issue of the poop. You don't want it to fall on your garage floor. Typically, it's a 5-week project. It doesn't, take months. You don't have a cow walking around in your, or a calf walking around in your garage. So it's a little bit easier. And in fact, the rabbit manure is round pellets that have a tendency to roll. The urine goes right straight down. And so there are plenty of ways that we can get you into a rabbit project at relatively cheap, considering the cost of so many of the projects nowadays, whether it takes land or just the cost of the animal itself and so on. So we would love to help you. If I haven't answered all your questions in regard to the cages, then don't hesitate in calling and giving us what information you can, and we'll get you headed in the right direction. Again, we can be found at Cornerstone Cages. You can call us at 361-407-9260. Please like the video and subscribe to our channel. Hit that bell, and that will give you a notification when we have new videos. Because again, what we're wanting to do is help you have the best rabbit project possible. And we may not have all the answers, but we've been doing this for a little while, and we're really here to help you with all the knowledge that we have to get you headed in the right direction, and also to keep you going in the right direction. So thanks for checking out the video. Have a great day.